So let's add some components for our application. One of the most common patterns that you see out there is the usage of tabs and a side menu like these ones. So in this module we're gonna learn how to implement this type of layout for application with tabs and a sidebar. And we're also going to create the base components for application. So let's get started, and we're going to create a few components. A lot of components now. First, let's add a components folder to our source folder. The style guide. If you go to Stenciljs website, guides, style guide, it recommends you to keep a folder for each component with its own TSX and CSS file. This is the style guide for creating stencil components, and it's a really good read. I really recommend you doing that because it can clarify a lot of what's going on in a component. So let's get started. I'm going to go back to our components. We're gonna create a folder, and let's first create a page for our home. So as you saw, we need to create a page home TSX and a SCSS. Now, if you remember our component, this is a base component. I'm just gonna copy it from our root page, and here we need to change for the name of the component, page home. Just gonna put home page, and this one now we need to add the URL. So style URL page home. Let's go and create a few more components. Now we're doing this manually, and it's quite annoying to create files like that. There is this plugin for Stencil. It's called Stencil Tools from Nate Moore. Has some commands that help you create components, and also has some snippets, so you can just avoid typing a lot. So just install it. There is some configuration that I did to it. So the configuration, if you go to if you do Control comma and type stencil, here's the stencil tools, and if you scroll down, I change here for the default to create a SCSS file instead of CSS, and I also remove the testing file, so it's not going to create testing files when I use the command to create a new component. So here's the settings for stencil. Anyways, now that you can choose to not to use that plugin, but I'm gonna use. If you do Ctrl+Shift+P and type stencil, should have. You can open the docs from here as well. You can start a project if you don't have one already. So we're gonna use the new component, and now I just need to type the name of it. So let's create another page. I'm gonna call it about. So if I reload, now my page is over here. Okay, 2 pages. Let's go ahead and create some routings. Let's remove this H1. Don't need it anymore. First, this is your top level component in an Ionic application. So we're gonna use Ionic router, and inside let's create routes for our page with Ion route. This takes a URL and a component. So first let's do for our home page slash, and it will be the page home component. Here the page about and slash about. Now let's start our server. npm start. Okay, so now again we have a blank screen. We added our routes, but we didn't add the outlet for it. If you ever did some Angular apps, you know that you need to put the Angular router outlet, and this works about the same with the Ionic application. You just need to add the Ion nav. Now if you reload, we have our page, and if you go to the about, oh, it's not going to be there because there is one thing called hash on a single page application, because really there is only the root here. They namespace it with a hash. It's kind of similar to when you try to use the HTML anchor points. So if you put the hash, it's going to go to our about page. But there is a way that you can remove this hash and just use the about. You need to pass to the Ion router, use hash, false. So here we're using this to input a result. Usually you do like that, but in JSX, it's the bracket. This is the same as if you're using the JavaScript string interpolation, like that. You just need to remove the $sign. So now if you go back to our application and we reload, we have our about page. There you go. Now let's create a few more components, and then we're gonna start creating our layout. Gonna do new component, app menu, and let's do one more for tabs root. You can either do the dash over here or just do camel case. You'll be the same. The plugin will realize what you mean. So this is the way I chose to namespace. For example, page will be a blank page, and then tabs is for that component, and anything else that a single component that I'm gonna input into other components, I'm gonna namespace with app, like app menu in here. You'll see more about this when you start to using it. So I'm gonna create another component called tabs home. So we have our tab root that we hold everything together, and then inside we're gonna have a few other components, like I'm creating the tabs, the home, but you can add more. I'm just namespacing tabs so I know that this page belongs to the tab component. Okay, so we learned how to create components and add some basic routing. On the next lesson, we're going to start creating our sidebar menu and adding some more Ionic components.